Hello, everyone. I'm glad you're able to join us tonight. We're going to be talking about some of the revelations and discoveries from our trip to Delphi. Hope and reveal some things about um, looking at it from a law enforcement perspective of how we would look at a crime scene, even the terrain and what that terrain could have upon influencing um, uh, control uh, paths of flight for victims to escape, and how that certain terrain can play a part in that, and what may have happened in Delphi. And so that's what we're going to be looking at tonight. And but as always in the housekeeping part of it, everyone respect the mods, respect each other, discuss any topic you wish, but let's keep the initials and names of individuals out. Um, if you have a person of interest, notify law enforcement. They're the ones that can do something with it. If you have any comments or anything you wish to convey to me personally, just send me an email at steve@truecrimeweb.com. But anyway, we'll get into it and start our show. All right. As always, introduction. This is Mrs. Steve, and I'm Steve. I'm a retired law enforcement, 20 years of service. During that career, I started off in the jail, worked the road, and became an investigator. And I had all different types of training from SWAT all the way up to becoming a state certified crime scene tech. Investigated all different types of crimes from small stuff and up to burglaries into homicides. Then I retired and found the true crime world and web sleuth world out here, and decided to become an ambassador and for law enforcement, and try to work with the true crime community and to assist them. And from that, we walked into creating a database to look for missing children, and also have been contacted and currently working several cases on cold cases for families. And so we're spread out quite a bit, but still want to be able to work with everyone and bring focus to Delphi and to Libya and Abby, who deserve justice. But tonight, as we go into, and we're looking at this being the coordinates that's well known, that's within the affidavit of the FBI search warrant that was conducted of the Ron Logan properties. The little pinpoint there is where, when you go on to Google Maps or you type in the coordinates, this is what you'll see. You'll see the Delphi Cemetery. You'll see the little red pin out in the middle of the woods. And of course, on the Google Maps I looked at, you see all these trees. And the importance about tonight is that when you see all this green foliage and you see the landscape, it's deceiving. When you watch the video from the helicopter, once again, it's very deceptive of what the actual terrain looks like. When you get boots on the ground, it's very, eye-opening. To me, I was shocked. I had no idea how rough the terrain is. Not saying it's not negotiable from certain areas, and we're going to cover that well also, because there is some ease of passage from certain directions. But the importance of this is that as our communities talk and as creators discuss and as people that they see this, they may not truly understand exactly where the crime scene is, what does it look like, what may have influenced the girls from that if they did break away, what stopped them from continuing to outrun or escape whoever was pursuing them, if that is the case of what happened that day. And so, and that is important because I got a bunch of since we did the cell phone locate, I had a lot of questions, emails sent to me asking, was it trees that created the bad signal? Was it terrain? What was going on there? And so I decided, and I also spoke to my community and asked them, did they want a 3D model? And doing the research on that is why I decided to go ahead and do this content tonight, so that when you discuss it, you're going to be able to see the path that these two innocent victims took and where they went. And I hope it's eye-opening to you as much as it was to me. But from the end of the bridge, if you just stared across the valley towards the cemetery, which you can't see the cemetery, but it's only on this. Now, this measurements are made by the measuring scale on Google Maps and Google Earth, so that when you measure it, it draws this, and it's line of sight. It doesn't include the downhill and other terrain features that may add additional footage on it, because to go that 550 feet, at sometimes you may have to go 60 or 70 feet down, flatten out, go down there 20 or 30 feet, come up, and you have little divots, or you'll have little wallows or holes, dips in the earth. And so there's a lot of obstacles that the actual footage may be a little bit more than just what the line of sight is. But just for the perspective, that if you were standing at the end of the bridge from where the abduction was and looking on this measurement to the approximate area, because we really, from my perspective, not knowing where they were located within that homicide crime scene, just picked an area that's about 50 feet off the bank, and that's what I went with. Because when I measured from the house 1,400 feet, which in the affidavit, the FBI agent put in there that it's 1,400 feet from his residence to, from Ron Logan's residence to the crime scene. And that's where I created this dot from, for the line of sight. But then I went and with the same scale within Google Maps, I measured the distance across the creek in that line of sight, that if they crossed that creek in this general area, this is from bank to bank, the best I could tell, 125 feet width. As you can see in this slide, it's, you got sandbars. It's not that, and when we were there looking at it right now, there's, if it's, maybe just a couple feet deep right now. There's far less water than what you see here in this picture. I don't know the exact date this picture was made, but currently there's very little water in that area right now. And it'd be quite easy to cross the creek and with just regular boots. Then from the edge of the creek bank to where that coordinate marker was, which was up on a ridge top, which I found interesting. Why would the law enforcement, the FBI, come up with those coordinates on the ridge top? Was it because that was the best signal? Was that a surveying marker so that they can go out there, that they could return to that exact coordinate and to have everything mapped out from that one spot, because it's a overwatch area where you could see the total crime scene? There's several different reasons of why they may have picked that coordinates to start the crime scene, but it's not 50 feet from the bank, because you subtract 50 from 325 and you got 275. So the assumption that the bodies were 50 feet from the crime scene, who knows? It's somewhere in that area where that crime scene tape was. But the elevation change, because that coordinates is setting up on a ridge top, I think that's about 60 feet above the flat that's alongside the creek where everyone has credited where the bodies were located for Libyan Abbey, and which I found strange when I went back and put in all the coordinates and came here. And like I said, there's several different reasons why they may have picked that location up there. Best signal, just overwatch as a pin, because on all crime scenes, when you get to a location, you have to be able to go back to that location, map out everything, put all the evidence that you ever gathered back in the exact locations. You can do that through photography, you can do it through measurements, and just, there's a lot of details and a lot of documentations at a crime scene, so that you can always go back to this crime scene and recreate it in the exact locations as best as possible, so that it's what has to be done. because if new developments are coming up or something happens or someone confesses to some part of the crime, and if they can tell you where certain things are and how far they were from certain areas, that is supporting evidence. And so that's how come it's so vital that you go in there and you create everything you can about that crime scene and keep it accurate records. Then from the back of the cemetery were the night that we ran our ping test. This is where Mrs. Steve and Purdue and Mr. Purdue.
Randy.
And well, Randy met us there earlier at David.
Yeah, that's true.
But that night when Mrs. Purdue and Mr. Purdue and Andrew were up there, they were right there at the back of the cemetery while I was doing certain testing. But from the back of the cemetery down to the creek edge, it's 625 feet by line of sight. Like I said, though, by the time you walk up and down divots, and direct travel is extremely harsh. When you go more towards Logan's house, which would be in the right side of the screen, upper corner, and come across this pastures and come back down through those that green foliage, which I'll show you without the foliage in a few minutes, it's far more gentle. With the victims have known that, with Libby and Abby have known what and how to escape through that area. With the predator, with this psychopath, have known. Law enforcement would have tried to identify what type of travel patterns were in that area from Ron Logan's down to where the murder occurred. And even in the fall of the year, if there's any travel and leaves, paths pop out pretty quick. And he had animals there that if they went down, and I don't know what parts were fenced off and where the fences were, and I don't know how much access his animals had. I don't know if they had access down to the flats or certain parts of the creek. I have no idea. I saw some fencing in certain areas that was down and old, but I don't know when that fencing became in the shape it did that wouldn't contain livestock. And I don't know how much fencing may have been removed in the last 5 years. So I just didn't speculate about what occurred at that. But there is some fencing around the areas, and you had to be careful that you didn't get entangled in that. But the line of sight, and this is the 1,400 feet that if you use the Google Maps scale and measurements, that came out exactly 1,400 feet. And so I said, okay, well, that's where I'm going to go with it because it's in the affidavit of the FBI. And so with that knowledge, that's why I picked that spot. And I wanted to show everyone that where the locations are, what are those terrain features, so you'll have some type of understanding as we progress with the case and we start talking about some of the things and that have influenced and changed my opinion about what the perpetrators did, maybe how they got control of the girls, and what some of the possibilities from a law enforcement perspective that may be counter to a lot of opinions out there. But it's just an opinion of mine. But we have to look at that and see where it goes. But I talked to another creator, well-respected creator, prior law enforcement. We spoke for about an hour and a half on the phone, and we went in great details about some of the theories of how they would have got access to this area, because there's certain directions that you're not going to easily be able to go into, and you wouldn't be able to contain or control multiple victims. And I'm speaking from experience, not from victims, but of people I've arrested in hostile.
I'm glad you clarified that.
Yeah. Hostile, that you're out and you're chasing someone through the woods for whatever, from, it may be burglary suspect, maybe armed robber, may be, just someone trespassing. or you have a warrant on somebody and they run through the woods and through terrain that is elevated and quite steep in certain areas, it's extremely hard to control an individual walking them out on some of these inclines, and due to the steepness, and you're not always going to be able to have hands on. And when they're handcuffed or controlled, or they're, you have to be extremely careful for the fact that you're having to take care of them and make sure they don't fall and hurt themselves, or anything like that occurs. And it's extremely difficult to handle people in certain grades and certain terrain features. And we'll be discussing that more in some more future videos as we go along. But from the pin where the first slide of where the coordinates were, 1,150 feet from Logan's house on that ridge that overlooks that flat and that valley where Deer Creek runs. And I just marked all these just for general purposes to give you what it looks like with the foliage. When we get into some of the other stuff, this is a picture, of course, of Ron Logan being interviewed during the while he's down there at the crime scene. And when you stand down there in that flat, this is what you see. If you look all the way around you, if you look above his cap, about an inch or so there at the top of your screen, you'll see a ridge line. You're in a bowl. I'm telling you, when you're down there in that creek bottom, while we were out there in Indiana and we was riding through the cornfields, we saw a lot of creeks and we saw a lot of little bridges and stuff. But this here was almost like a canyon. It's extremely deep. It's a high ridge area in that part of Delphi. I don't know how much more territory is like that in that community, but it was very impressive that standing there from my viewpoint of someone that has chased individuals and have caught individuals due to that they run into a certain natural barrier. And that's what I'm going to call this. This is a natural barrier, that this isn't the places that people run and can easily escape from. And what part did that play in this case? We'll look at it. We'll profile that in some other in future, and we'll discuss that in great detail, because it did have an impact on the case, I believe, and most certainly hampered the escape of Libby and Abby. Standing on top of the ridge, on one of the ridges, you can see that you can't see the exact angle, although we'll be getting into some of the topography and topographic maps that I found and show you what some of these inclines are. But if you fell off this ridge here, it'd be quite the beating before you got to the bottom. This ridge top is probably about 60 feet high, and it's hard to climb from this angle. Now, there's some more gentle, but I just wanted to give you perspective that not all the terrain is gentle, what you would think walkable. And if you watch some of the interviews with Ron Logan, and I want to thank Hoosier Co-Cases he sent me some information, sent me a video of all the Logan stuff. And I want to thank you from his interviews, and appreciate him trying to keep, that he and I, we're almost on opposite poles, and that is a great thing to have, that I have people out there that will look at my product, and we should have that. We should have people that look at it and say, not everything is like this, because we do not want to create anything or give a false tense of or pretense of this is what it looks totally like all the way around. No, but this is from one area that on one side of where Libby and Abby was murdered, this is what it looked like. Then when you get on top of that ridge, even once you reach the top of some of these ridges, when you get there and you're still walking towards the cemetery, there's natural terrains. There's little holes, wallows, that just dips, that just out of nowhere. Mother Nature, as it carved this over the years, and whatever type of throughout the history of this community, how much of it was agriculture, what was done, or was it all just natural development and things that happen in nature? Don't know, but found it extremely interesting that even when you get to the top of these ridges, sometimes it's just not flat, gentle grades. You still have what Mother Nature gives you, some hollows and things that just create little traps and things. But down at the bottom next to the creek, there's a shelf down there. It's what here in Georgia we just call a creek flat. And so on that creek flat, it's gently rolling. And as you look down the creek, you can see the ridge line drops in a certain direction, and which is right up the creek channel. And so, of course, creek channel has to be in a low-lying area and would continue that way. Then this is one of the paths that if you watch a lot of the videos, especially with the news crews that went in there after the murder scene was released by the FBI and law enforcement, you can see where there's a little walking area. It's been traveled, I don't know by how often and how much, by law enforcement and news crews and Ron Logan and other people going to look at the scene. Don't know how many people saw this, but it's, like I said, this direction here is not the harshest terrain. You know, it's, while it's steep, it's negotiable. And Ron Logan walked it multiple times. And I think he's in his 70s. Now, some of the interviews, when you're listening to him and you watch these videos, you'll hear him being short, winded, shortness of breath. And is that due to the cold, or is that due to him walking? And who knows? But most certainly go out there and research it, look at those videos. They're quite interesting. Now, here's the topography of the area, and this is a topographic map. For you out there that don't fish, when we look at lakes and stuff, this is what a lake bottom looks like. You have the creek channels, you have topographic markings, maps, these lines. As you see these little lines on the area, they're in increments of 10 foot between spacing of the line. If the lines are extremely close and stack on each other, that means they're extremely steep. If they're laid out and you can see spaces, and the greater the space between one line to the next, the more gentle the slope is. So as you get over there below Logan's residence to the right, and you can see that some of the lines are, you know, great distances from them, that's a gentle sloping area. As you get closer to the creek, the lines get a little bit closer. That means they get a little bit steeper. And you can see on some of the creek bends where it's almost vertical, and it is. I mean, it's extremely steep that you don't want to fall off, because you're going to be falling 60 to 70 feet. But I wanted to show you the importance of this, that from where law enforcement entered, they came in from those more gentle sloping areas. They didn't egress or walk out of that area up those steep embankments. I did, but I didn't. And I did it in dead of night also. So it was extremely hostile and very, because you couldn't see 5 feet. I'm serious. It was extremely dark out there. And I came up a couple of those ridges and went down one of the ravines and all the way to the creek, and then turned around and went all the way back up one of those embankments. Didn't take the most gentle path. Didn't even know the most gentle path existed at that time. I knew that law enforcement probably went in and found a more gradual, gentle way in, just as a landowner would, or property owner would, or most people that visited a site would know that in the area that if you're going to try to get there, this is the way you would go. If you're on the where the trail ends and the Moonon Bridge starts, walking towards where the body's location is, it's a gentle walk for several hundred yards.
I have to do the blue light I'm hearing that Jennifer Rochelle became a member, but it hasn't popped up on my screen yet.
Okay. Thank you for your support. Appreciate that.
Thank you, Jennifer. And she is also a new mod for you. You just didn't know that.
Thank you. Thank you. It means a lot to us. We appreciate all your support. But if you walk from where the bridge or where the trail ends and the bridge starts, it's a very gentle slope. That's where Randy said that this is the easier way to go because not everyone wanted to cross the bridge. And so when me and one of the persons that had assisted me in on numerous occasions as communicating, getting access to some of the property, we came off the bridge and we went over there and Randy said, well, this is a route that goes up and it's very gentle. And so there were 6 of us and we walked in that area and it wasn't that bad walking from across that terrain until you got over there to where that ravine is just before, as you see, that's just to the left of the cemetery. There's a little ravine where it shows some water flow going down. When you got to that area, it was extremely steep. You couldn't descend that area without holding on to trees. I mean, there's a trail down through there. And I believe this is probably the reason that the fire department had someone posted on those trails the day after or the morning of and told people this area had already been searched. That large flat area that is between the ravine up to the road and back to the left. Because once you got to that other area and that steep slope, that would be extremely dangerous. And what first responders do not want anyone to do is to get injured. And so they would keep you out of that. They would tell you that, this area is secured, go somewhere else or go with another search team somewhere else. I'm just speculating about that, but I know as a first responder, that's what we would have done to keep people from trying to progress until they injured themselves. Because, like I said, some areas and some points of access are extremely dangerous, and in the conditions that were there that day, might have been more hazardous. I don't know what all the conditions were. But as you look at this area, that from the abduction end of the bridge down the hill, you can see all the way down to the private drive that there's 4 lines. So that's a 40-foot drop from the top of where the abduction and contact with bridge guy went to get down. If they went straight down beside the bridge, that's about a 40-foot drop to start with. Then if they dropped off of that driveway, and in future videos, we're going to talk about, I thought about to say something. We're going to talk about what might have happened, what would drive that if something was going on after he said down the hill, and they get down there and they realize what a great threat they face. That did they see an opportunity to escape? Did something happen? Did they make that dash towards the area where they ultimately were found? There's a lot of possibilities there that we're just going to have to look at as we gather more information and look at it. But then you have another 20-foot drop, and then you cross the creek and you come up on that shelf where the bodies are approximate due to what the speculation is. But once you get on that flat, you're sitting down there and you're looking at these areas that, I mean, it's like a wall. And I was very impressed with that. And I could see where that if you ran into that area, there's in human nature, there's things that's called fight and flight. And there's no certain order that human nature always does or tells you. Sometimes people fight from the get-go and never take flight. Some people take flight from the get-go and never fight unless they have to. If I had taken flight and I got to that location where their bodies were found and saw that wall, then that's time that I would have said, well, I'm not going to outrun them up that. And is that what happened? I have no idea, but it is something that we have to consider. That when you look at the topography of this area and that, whatever occurred there during those critical moments, is this what happened? And that's an importance that we have to do. And as law enforcement, when we look at these crime scenes, what was that crime scene? Where were they taken? Where did the abduction occur? What were they made to do that we know of during that abduction? What type of evidence do we have along these paths? What is natural movement? Why would someone go down that hill? Why would someone tell someone to go down that hill to a private drive? And, you know, is it vehicles? Don't know, but we're going to look at that aspect in the future. And, but during the flight, or, you know, that wasn't a natural area that if you took them down the hill that you would take them over there to that spot where they were found. It's a very strange situation. But once I visited it, like I said, it changed my opinion on several different levels of what went on that day or what some of the possibilities were. Because I always took it for granted by looking at the foliage that this is a gentle sloping area. There are some areas that are a little bit easier to trend to walk and you know, move from one location to the other. And these angles, for me to easily explain to you what these lines mean and what angles of elevations and what it would be, is I had to figure out what would be the best way that I could create a visual for you, because it's extremely hard to understand a topographic map if you're not familiar with it. And so I said, okay, let's look at what carpenters use, roofing. And here's another one that says there's 9 feet distance from Logan's residence to the bottom of the creek. But anyway, roof pitch. This is an angle that is consistent. In land navigation, this angle by line of sight, you find it all the time. You find different angles, different elevation, and you walk that distance and you gain or you ascend or descend on those angles. And of course, you have to deal with foliage, brush piles, holes, old rotting trees. There's so much debris in some of these forested areas, but the angle is still the same. And so I looked at the pitch of roofs so that you could go out there and look at these and understand what we're talking about. This here is different roof pitches for different types of houses. And I did this so that when I put this with the land terrain, you'll see what I'm talking about, what those angles were. I went in with a calculator and counted those lines and over a certain distance and certain footage, and came up with certain angles so that you would understand what those angles are. I have all those notes. If anybody wants them, just email me and I'll send you what I got about showing you the calculators and stuff that I did on that. But anyway, if you look at these different angles, roof lines, that in the pitches and the elevation, that you can see that where the dark shaded area on the far, almost the big triangle that has a high peak, that's what those closeness of lines would indicate that grade is. And that's the angle that you would climb. And I climbed it that night up that steep incline. Like I said, I almost flipped over backwards one time. And I thought, man, this isn't good. And if I hadn't had a walking stick, I couldn't have done it, because there wasn't always a tree to grab hold of and sure footing. And so sometimes you just had to bury that walking stick and move up that embankment. As you move over towards between the line of sight from Logan's residence down to the murder site, you can see that slope overall over a distance is less and is easier to walk and to move along that ridge and get access. And I wanted to show you this so that you would understand that there are certain parts of the property that give you access more easily. With the victims, with Libby and Abby, have known about that only a few hundred feet away to the right through the brush and through whatever their area there were, would they have seen it? Don't know. Would they have recognized it for what it was? Don't know, because even there at the 4 and 12 pitch, the 18.43 3-degree angle, it's still quite a barrier that it's uphill and it's over several, it's harder to, than what you think. A lot of people's walked it, and it's, it can be done. I mean, it's not that it's impossible. I mean, you had, ain't no telling how many officers walk it multiple times during the day as crews changed out, evidence was secured, equipment was brought in, taken out, and all the other people that visited the area since then that have went this route, the news crews and Ron Logan that walked it back and forth numerous times. Could it be done? Absolutely. But it's not always that it can be done. It's what is known to a person at the time of flight, and what do they see and how do they understand. And is that something that they would have even had the opportunity to get to? We just don't know at this moment. But I wanted to show you this and give you an idea. And I may actually create a 3D rendering of this, or this may be good enough. Let me know in comments, and let me know in emails and things at steve@truecrimeweb.com if you actually want a 3D model of this, or is this good enough? I talked to some of my community and they want a model, and I'm probably going to go that way just for myself, but it depends on how much or how big that we go, because this is a large area here it looks like it's, a small area, but it's not. It's hundreds of feet. And so creating such a thing would take some time, and it's not a real big deal, but I've created models before. But anyway, if you have any information of Libyan Abbey, or you have a person of interest, let law enforcement know. Let's bring this to an end. They deserve justice. They deserve everything that we can do for them. And we should try to do everything we can to make sure that this psychopath, this animal that did this to these two innocent children, gets exactly what he deserves. And but I appreciate you watching the presentation, and now we'll get into some questions if we have any.
Okay, hold on. I'm still starring. So hold on one second. There's going to be a few of these tonight, so sit back. Let's see here. Hold on, I'm trying to get them all.
But the reason, like I said, I created this is so that I understand it from a law enforcement perspective of handling people that don't want to go to jail in hostile, elevated areas. And it's not so easy to maintain control of the individual handcuffed or not handcuffed and keep control of them on some of these areas, because you don't want them to turn around and throw you off a ridge. And so bridge guy will face the same obstacles in some of these areas. Going down that hill, how much control could he have had of Libyan Abbey? How much distance was between the two of them? Or how much distance was between one and maybe he had absolute control of another one? We don't know. But we'll be looking at some of those aspects.
Okay, so it's my turn.
All right.
All right, so first thing is we have Double Rainbows and Jennifer Rochelle 2-month membership.
Thank y'all.
So
that means a lot to us.
They were telling me that Jennifer was a member, but it's 2 months.
Appreciate it.
So thank you. All
means
right,
a lot to us. We can't do what we do without y'all's support.
No, we
appreciate
cannot. All right, so we've got a bunch. So
Okay.
bear with me.
No problem.
I'm working the Google machine. All right. This one cracks me up. This is Anna. See that first little thing there? All this good stuff to listen to, and my dogs are going nuts. So I am not alone. Thank you, Anna. Makes me feel
Maybe
better.
it's my voice, Anna.
Could be. All right. And Rose, could the bodies be seen from the other side of the creek?
We will talk about that, because there was an interesting development while I was standing there. And from the location where we were at, from that location, if they were there, absolutely.
And Copper Horse, I'm taking you up on your recommendation. Double rainbows. I wonder why he felt compelled to go to the crime scene. Talking about Ron Logan.
It's his property. I mean, you know, there's so many possibilities. I mean, you know, there's variables and don't know. Interesting.
Charlie, is that ridge line the private drive or end of the bridge level? Wondering how steep that second hill is from the private drive to the creek.
All right, if you take it off, I'll show you.
Take it off. Okay. See you bye.
If you see the abduction end bridge down at the bottom where I point where the end of the bridge would be, 4 topographic marks down from there is where the private drive is. That little blue line that moves up to the property of the owners of that property. That's the private drive, that little blue line that's in the topography lines. And so that's one of the areas where they thought that the girls first down the hill was, or is supposed, we don't know when down the hill was first set. The affidavit says towards the end of the video, he says it, and were they still at the top of the ridge and at the end of the bridge, and is that where they're saying down the hill? But yeah, down the hill, that the bottom blue line where it says private drive, right, the tip of that arrow is where the private drive is.
All right, and Molly, do you think the topography, made it easier or harder for BG and possibly friends to watch LNA?
There's a lot of different ways of putting or placing people under surveillance, and it's generally either from high areas or low areas. Now, Libby and Abby being on the bridge would have had high ground. Other people from the low areas could have maybe made use of foliage or under the bridge to maintain staying out of line of sight, and or around a curve or some other natural ground feature. There's a lot of different ways people can hide, and that's what we look for in law enforcement when we approach these things. That where would a perpetrator or a predator hide and wait until they ambush, and what type of ambush was it?
All right, hold on. I'm just catching up here. All right, let's see here. Okay, 843. All right, and JDR, didn't people say from the start that the perpetrator would have to know this area like the back of their hands? Well, someone who lives near it would.
That's possible, and you have to look at that. And law enforcement would, and they did with Ron Logan, and I believe they did with the property owners of the property where the bridge ends too. I think they looked at both of them, and I think searches were conducted on both. I believe that some creators have mentioned that all the property owners in that general area, that from both the abduction and the other area, have been searched in some degree.
All right, hold on. I'm still catching up. All right, Sean, 844. You may never get done tonight.
Oh, we will.
All right, and Teresita, whoa, great pictures, a real eye opener.
Thank you. Thank you.
JJ, it used to be an area for mining aggregates.
That I was wondering about some of those ground features and wondering what that was. And that makes sense.
And Molly, do you think an ATV could get down or up the hill to the other side?
Up towards where Ron Logan's property is, yes, absolutely. But law enforcement, whenever they would have went into that area, they would have looked for those signs. And were they signs of that? We don't know. I don't know. But they would have noted them.
And Mark, skilled hands, I've observed many things of such over the years as well last year when I was up there last March.
Hey, Mark. Awesome. Good to see you, sir.
And Teresa, Mrs. Steve, do you feel any senses or anything in the area where these beautiful, other than they ain't no way I'd be walking them mountains in the dark?
Yeah.
Not really.
Yeah, she was questioning my sanity of going in there.
And I wasn't alone questioning your sanity at night. So there you go. It was more than me. Okay, and Mark, throughout Carroll County, the Wildcat Creek, Deer Creek, the Tippecanoe, and the Wabash River exhibits rugged, rough terrain. Adams Mill has bluffs next to the covered bridge.
And I was, like I said, I was shocked when I saw this area because we got up there and all we saw was flat cornfields as far as you could see. And then you go to the end of the bridge and then you see this, and as you're walking towards the bridge on that trail, you see it's beautiful country, but there's some rough areas in there.
And Mark Skilled Hands, there is a tree on the north side of the river. There is a railroad spike in the tree approximately 7 feet off the ground. Right?
I didn't see that.
No.
That's interesting, though.
A little over my head. All right. And Molly, wow, that is so steep. It looks even worse on the map than it does in the pics.
And that was one of the things that when I got down there and I looked up and I saw that, I said, yes, this is something that would create that if you were in pursuit of an individual, that they may turn and realize that there's really, no escape. And so we go from flight to fight.
And Randy, hello, Randy, my walking partner. That's why the killer killed in the daytime, because it would be hard to leave at night.
Randy, I told her what you said about her doing her checking her socks.
Appreciate that, Randy. All right. And CLH, it's very dark in the forest at night.
It is.
And you should know. And Tracy, I'm with you. Oh, goodness. I wouldn't imagine being out there at night. It's creepy. Sitting in a locked car. How about that? And Mark Skillhands, there is a gravel trail on the north side west of the main trail that will take you to this tree. Huh.
No, I hadn't heard that, but I'll get with you on that. Thank you.
Yeah. And Kelt, approximately how many feet from the creek were the bodies found? Thank you.
The rumors are, you hear everything from beside the creek to 50 feet. And so my best indicator was what was in the affidavit, which said that the crime scene and the bodies were located 1,400 feet from the residence. And so I pinned the residence, and Charlie, 883, and I'm lost for words. The map is an eye opener. I always felt terrible for what the girls must have gone through, but how you've explained the area, the absolute dread they must have felt. Thank you so much for the information. And I appreciate that. I appreciate your support. And that's the reason I wanted to do this, so that people would realize that just looking at it from overhead on Google Maps doesn't give it justice for what it is. Until you're down there looking at it and seeing what it is, that's it. Like I said, it changed my opinion, and that's one of the reasons I went there, is because I needed to see it to understand what might possibly have happened. And just like on all crime scenes, you have to be there to experience the knowledge of the terrain. But as I was saying, if you measure 1,400 feet from Logan's residence, that's about where 1,400 feet maxes out. Some areas you would be in the creek, some areas towards the bridge. And I just picked that. I could be off 100 feet. I don't know. But anyway, that's where I marked it, just for this map, to just give you a general, because there is certain areas we have to speculate in. I know it was somewhere in that area, but hopefully I haven't misjudged too bad.
All right, give me just a second. Every time I think I'm making
progress.
Yeah. All right, let's see here. All right, sees through. How far do you think they were moved for staging, and could one man move them alone?
If we go just by what the crime scene tape outline was, I mean, you're only looking at a small area on relatively level, flat ground. Yes, one person could easily move them. And but now moving them after dark or something from a different area, I'm talking about extensive, and we don't have anything indicative of that. We have a marked off area that's, looks like it's just a few hundred square feet. And so within that area, yes, one man could easily move them.
And Mark, Skilled Hands, he's wanting to know the trunk the spike in is dead. How long has it been there? So if someone knows that answer, let us know.
The guy that was talking about the mining information, he may know, and I'll do some research on it. Randy probably knows, or I will ask Randy to look into that, because like I said, he has so much local knowledge, and he may know when the miners were there and a railroad spike, and when, the railroad's been there, of course, for a long time, but that doesn't mean that this was a spike from that railroad.
All right, Molly, at Steve, having been on the terrain, do you think it makes more sense that first responders called the search off that night too dangerous?
I believe that played a part in it. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right, and Anna, Randy G showed the ravine in a video. I think that's why the crime scene wasn't found the night of the 13th. Either cross the creek or go through the treacherous ravine, so stay away. Understandable.
Exactly. We're on the same page on that.
All right, Molly, at Steve, was there ground fog at night from the creek, or maybe at Randy? May depend on the temp wind.
Couldn't see that far. It could have been foggy. Like I said, you couldn't see 5 feet. And especially when I was going up the ravine, of course, I couldn't look behind me. Did y'all see any fog? Once I got up out of the ravine and up on the near the road, there was no fog. I don't know what right down at the creek, but I didn't see, I looked at the water and I really didn't notice any fog. So probably not the night I was there.
All right. And Patricia, where on this map did the girls enter to get to the bridge?
If you look straight below where the coordinates location is, this map doesn't show the bridge coming across, but it does show that little trail. And I don't have
Huh?
Can they see my
Your what?
My mouse, my little arrow?
That would be a no.
Okay. All right. And see if I can see it. No, we don't have any. There's above, in between the coordinates location that I have and the private drive text, on that steep bridge incline is where the railhead starts and the trail ends, moves across that ravine over the private drive, and where the point of the abduction in the bridge is where that bridge line runs across that creek in that valley. I didn't mark that. I wish I had. Didn't think about it.
Okay. So 8:15. Mercy. Okay. Well, Jay Lee, do you think they ran?
I believe so.
That's quick. CLH, they realized they were trapped. I just cannot imagine what they went through.
I agree with you.
Kelt, the bodies / approximate arrow seems to be pointing to the creek side. I am confused. Thought they were found further in.
I just picked a place that was around 50 feet in off the bank and around 1,400 feet from the residence. And this is the area, those two areas met. Yes, I could be off. I'm not saying this is the exact spot. It's somewhere on that flat. The news crew says it was in that flat. And the coordinates are up on the ridge top that they give. And so I don't I'm not laying claim that this is 100% where my arrow pointing. It's just approximate. That's how come I put approximate on there. If everything on Google Maps measurements is correct too, I'm having to go by them. Seems relatively correct though, because it from where I had marked 50 feet in, when I ran 1,400 feet to that spot, it came up almost identical. So.
What the hell is this spike? Okay. All right, let's see here. I think we're good. Let's keep going.
Got any more questions?
Only about 55.
Excellent.
All right, and Anna, what about searchers or neighbors on RL's property the night of the 13th? From his house, would it have been fairly easy hiking to the crime scene?
It would have been, yeah. I mean, what you could have hiked in daytime at that incline going down, would they have known the easiest path? I don't know. I don't know how often they would have, or if it was marked or was it fenced off. I have no idea, because he did have horses, and I don't know what areas were fenced, and I don't know how many searchers went across his property that night, and would they have chosen to go down certain areas, and if they'd went, lighting. One of the bad things about searching at night for victims or bad guys is that when you turn on a light, you can only see what's within the light. Anything outside that, you just don't see. And then when you turn it off, you lose your night vision. And or when you turn off the light, you don't see anything because you've lost your night vision, and it takes a while to build that back.
All right, let's go back and see where we're at. Oh, I just had another one pop in here. Hold on one second. So, I don't know if starring this is any easier. All right, and CLH, whoever did this is a monster. You're absolutely correct.
No 100%.
doubt. 100%. CJK, being taken across the creek, panicking, and losing a shoe is possible.
Yes, I mean, he could have had absolute control of them all the way to that site. And I don't know. We'll have to. It did seem to be a strange place that to take them if you was, if you're there to just simply kill, or there's no need to take them that far, or even across the creek. And so we have to weigh certain things and see what the likelihood of certain things are. And who knows? Right now, we don't know.
And double rainbows, topography, the configuration of a surface, including its relief and the positions of its natural and man-made features.
That is it.
Thank you so much. And Jay Lee, I feel like they have tried to run.
I have that feeling too, for the fact, like I said, it wasn't, the feeling of it is that is not a place that you would have picked to murder two children. There were other areas that wouldn't require crossing the creek to do and accomplish that.
And Anna, I wonder if the killer thought Libby, at 5 foot 2 inches and 200 pounds, was obese and unable to run. Instead, she was a young athlete.
Exactly. And that may have led to certain things and certain injuries.
And Patricia, I feel at least one of them tried to run and it caused him to panic.
Yeah. we discussed that, myself and the other creator. Like I said, we spoke for an hour and a half about it, and he's extremely wise, and I respect him greatly, and we're looking at some other developments.
And digital. I know I'm in the minority, but I don't care. If they were in a hole, that many people, that close to where they were last known to be, I think they should have been found. Absolutely, just my opinion.
Yeah.
I guess.
No,
JMPO.
just my personal opinion.
There you
go. But what time would they have been? And I agree with you. If it was full daylight and they're over there on the road looking across, and from what I saw happen when I was over there at the crime scene with an individual traveling up that driveway that absolutely saw us, that I would agree with you that in proper lighting, they would have been found. I just don't know when the searchers were on any part. We don't know exactly where the searchers were at any given time. The searchers do. I just don't have the logs. I would really like to see the logs and where the searchers exactly were and at what time and what was the lighting at when they were in certain locations. And that would tell us a lot more.
All righty. And Molly, at Steve, it looks like it would be really steep to go directly from the cemetery due south to the creek. It looks easier if you went east and came back around, but not sure how far that is.
You are correct. I did. I took myself.
Took the shortcut.
Myself and Mrs. Purdue, we took a extremely harsh angle and went up that ridge. I mean, even that was doable, and it wasn't the worst way to go, but it was challenging.
CJK, I still can't get over how risky it was to kidnap the girls during the afternoon and then doing all that BG did and the time it took for all of it.
Yes. And it's still, it wasn't really long of a time from the time the searchers got there, and how much time did he spend there? Like I said, I don't know. That's all speculation.
And Anna, would fishermen be able to walk distances up and down the creek bank, crossing the creek if necessary?
Sure. I mean, I believe the DNR says that's a negotiable creek and fishable, and people fish it, kayak it, and everything else. So
I did keep him out of the water.
Yeah, I had the equipment that if I had to go up that creek, that's what we was going to do.
No. Kelt, this presentation is outstanding. Please know I appreciate all this effort.
Thank you. Thank you. That's what we want to do, is try to clarify and not confuse anybody any more than we have to.
And Kristen, behind the crime door. Steve, your work is absolutely awesome. No one has a clue about that terrain until they are there and try to maneuver it. Thank you for all you do.
And check out Christian behind the crime door. I think she's on the air or will be shortly.
9 o'clock?
Yep, at 9 o'clock.
Okay.
So y'all check her out.
And Anna, great graphics. Thank you so much, Steve and Mrs. Steve.
Absolutely. That's what we do. We try to, like I said, make it where people can understand and be able to look at it with some type of information that gives them a reasonable accuracy.
All right. And sweet Caroline, thank you both so much for all this hard work. God bless these young girls. Can't imagine what they must have felt.
No.
Me neither.
I've seen a lot of them in this situation that as you work crime scenes, that it's just horrible. What went through them and what were they thinking? It's just a nightmare.
And Molly, anyone who's lived in or driven through mountains would know that a 6% grade will create extra lanes and runoff ramps for trucks. Warning signs and all that. Those are steep grades.
Oh no, I agree with you. I wouldn't want to run up and down them. I had to when we was in training and land nav. I hated, I hated terrain, and as people that's been in any type of land navigation courses, classes, and searches, we hate We hate this type of terrain.
All right, and bear with me. I'm catching up. Get you something to drink. I mean, it's just like not ending.
The Google machine's getting her now.
Oh, Cop Facts.
Where's Copfax?
905.
Thank you, sir.
Appreciate
Check
it.
out Copfax. Not that anyone out there that's watching this doesn't know who Copfax is. Absolutely had a brilliant career, brilliant man, and enjoy talking to him. He's very informative and has a lot of knowledge, and is quite the writer. Check out his books too, man. He has had a brilliant career.
All right, now back up to 60. All right, and Honeybee. Visuals are great.
Thank you.
And Goat. That's interesting. Good evening, Steve and Mrs. Steve. And hello to all the TCW Webbers in the chat. Steve and Mrs. Steve, I'm highly impressed with your findings and especially your presentation. Excellent.
Thank you.
Patricia, fantastic graphics and such a great idea to explain the topography in this way. Bravo.
Yeah, I'm trying to make it easy. Like I said, fishing all the years, it's easy for me to read a map, but trying to explain it to Mrs. Steve,
I don't fish.
She doesn't fish.
Nadia, Steve will solve this.
I wish that would be absolutely true, but there's some really great officers out there that's worked this case, and they have far more information on this, and hopefully they've already solved it, and we're on that path to for justice for Libby and Abby. But I am so grateful that we can focus on this case and bring attention to it that it deserves.
And Molly, would love to have a model if it's not too hard.
Okay.
And Anna, all this reinforces my idea that the killer is an experienced outdoorsman, rather the opposite of the people's favorite two main suspects. Yes,
and I discussed that in great length the other day, and and I'll tell you, Copfax and me, we went over this, and we're looking at certain things, and it's and he agrees that there's certain things and aspects of the case that we need to look at further.
And this is great. Very interesting new angle on the terrain. Are you sure that's the location where the victims were found?
I'm only going by where the helicopter was flying and where they were circling, where the flashes that if you look at Mob Crew and some of his content, that in the area where those, as he did a great breakdown of the agents in the area, that you can see light flashes. It's in this area. Am I pointing to the exact location? I'm, like I said, I'm within 50 or 100 feet of it, but no, I'm not saying that this is exactly where the bodies were. It's somewhere in this area. And what type of equipment were they using? Were they using some 3D imagers that were, as the mirrors flashed off the sun, that's what those little reflections were. It's in this area. And so the resources is going to be the helicopters flying around. It's going to be the news crews that walk down there. It's going to be the ridge lines from the photographs taken. And it all shows this common area. Like, once again, I haven't went in there and looked at and identified the exact trees that the crime scene tape was attached or wrapped around. I could do that. And at some point I get in touch with the Logans, and hopefully they'll allow me to go in there and do that. And then I can tell you exactly. But right now I don't have that information.
and sees through. Could you exit the creek right into the ravine that runs from creek to cemetery?
Oh man, that I went down that ravine in light in total darkness, and walking in a ravine is extremely dangerous. As water goes down that ravine in certain flood situations, it just creates little holes and pockets and uneven subsurfaces that, if sometimes I stepped in holes that I went up to my hip in. Extremely treacherous. And like I said, I didn't break anything, luckily. But even that little ravine going straight down, it's pretty steep in certain spots.
And trust and justice. If you had been at the bridge before, partying or whatever, you would know every inch.
I don't know. I never realized it from the parts of the bridge, but I hadn't spent a lot of time there. I only been there a day, 2 days, and I never realized until we got over there exactly how it changed. Like I said, watching it from the helicopter and looking at it from Google Maps is totally.
And Honeybee would like a model.
Yeah, it'd be a great hobby for a while, and I'm looking, at exactly how to design it now.
It'll take you a minute.
Oh yeah, it'll take days.
Okay, and CJK, unrelated to Delphi, but if lye is used on bodies then buried, how accurate is it if a cadaver dog hits on the spot? Does lye break down bone?
I am not an expert on cadaver dogs. I'm going to be talking to one. She wants one. I'm going to be talking to an expert soon, and I'll ask him that question. Great point. Thank you. I'm going to write that down now.
All right, and why? If BG controlled Abby, I bet Libby would try to defend her.
And that's something that has been brought up before. And is that a possibility? Absolutely.
And Anna, I think that killer was physically fit. If he shows up here in Idaho, we'll see how well he swims in our big river, or if he will be so full of lead he'll sink. The fish have to eat too.
I understand.
That's true.
I understand. That's
absolutely. All right, Nan, this analysis totally leads me to theorize girls ran from the perp in panic across water, got befuddled by that seemingly sheer cliff terrain, giving perp time to catch up and execute in that flat area.
And that was the impression I got, that when I stood there and I looked around and saw that ridge line, and I looked at that bluff wall in front of me, that's the feeling I had. Don't mean that's exactly what they had, but that's what I looked at, that this was almost like a box canyon.
And go, Steve, would you be able to see the bodies even in the dark with a flashlight from the other side of the creek?
I wouldn't have. No, not from that distance. No, I wouldn't have. If I was on the other side with a spotlight, I wouldn't have seen them.
And Sean, the sun was out and straight overhead the day the girls were found. Would make it easy to see them from the other side of the creek.
I believe so. Like I said, we had someone that saw us from the other side of the creek while we were standing there.
All right. One down. Oops. All right. And Anna, we don't know how the girls were covered with limbs and leaves. In my opinion, it's not possible there were dolls, stuffed animals, lots of clothes at the same, because they would have been seen from afar. Possibly.
Yes.
All right. And Elaine, Steve, now that you have seen the crime scene and the terrain and traveled through it, do you believe the crime was committed by a local who would have been very familiar with that area?
I've still got to, we're looking at a couple of avenues on that currently. And it would have, the parts that play into it now is that with certain technologies and abilities of Google Maps and things and looking up and doing research, there's still the possibility that you wouldn't have to have daily knowledge of that area. It might have been something that you could have done with research if you was targeting and trying to get, if you had been following or someone on social media and knew their habits and possibly knew some of their, as we think about in victimology, of what their areas they frequent, what are their habits, their movement habits, where do they frequent, that you could research. And that's the thing that parents have to be so aware of, is that all the stuff that our children put on social media now, predators can go out there and build a profile and of a future potential ambush point. And we have to be very, very careful. And is that the case on this? This is something that we're looking at, but we're still working on that.
All right. And Anne suggests looking at Google Earth rather than Google Maps for topography measurements.
I did. Actually, these measurements were made off of Google Earth. I use them both. Sometimes I say one or the other, but yes, I did the Google Earth measurements on this.
And DGR Dave, Steve, does the timeline between when the girls took the Snapchat and the suspected end 3:30 add up?
We discussed that in great detail. Was it yesterday or the day before?
I don't know.
I can't remember. But anyway, that has been discussed because the upload time could have been from a lot of different locations and just don't know.
And Sean, no foliage on the trees would make it easy for the killer to see a clearer path through the woods to go around and back to the trail.
That's possible, but it would still have been an extreme clearer path. Would have either way. I mean, you have to either go towards the residence of Logan's or come back across the creek and go back up the other terrain, or there's other options available too that we're looking at.
All right, and Honeybee, nothing about ATV tracks in the search warrant though.
That's correct, that I know of.
Okay. And sees through. Is it true you can see the bridge from Ron's house? I don't believe you can.
We didn't.
No.
But now we're there under heavy foliage.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't get there in the right time of year, but if we go back, I won't get there with the same foliage.
Or no foliage.
Or no. Well, that's what it was. No foliage. That's
Yeah.
what I'd like to get there and see that.
All right. And Brad, tide seems to be currently changing to the serial killer theory. Thoughts?
You know, there's a lot of different ways, but it's hard to get away from. And I could write off a lot of things that the Kleins did. That if he was catfishing the girls and then he finds out that two girls that he was catfishing happened to be murdered, and he went into self-preservation, or he went into covering his tracks and creating alibis that, I talked to him that morning. But you can't get away from searching for DNA on a body. You can't get away from searching for a gas station 1.36 miles away from the murder site. That's some critical information, and I can't explain them, and I'm gonna have to explain them in some fashion, or someone's gonna have to explain those searches, and that I was supposed to meet them that day, and creating that alibi. There's a lot of stuff that has to be answered. Not saying they're how much of a part they played in it, but there's a lot has to be answered to see why those things were done.
All right. And Molly, was there any obvious place for BG or possible friends to be in a hidey hole at the end of the bridge?
Yes, under the bridge tile or ties themselves, you could alongside that. There's a lot of heavy trees on the other side, and run alongside there that you may have been able to get quick access to.
And Lynn, is there a path from the crime scene to the cemetery? And if so, is it flat around the hill?
If you look at the videos made by the news crew, it's not flat. It goes down these steep inclines, but there is a path from where that gate is that's around that law enforcement and the news crews and who else, I mean, you know, what all paths did law enforcement use to get in there? I don't know. But it's far easier over towards Logan's residence than straight from the cemetery.
CJK, regarding the trail cameras, one not working and the other was ? For the one not working, would they take fingerprints, do you think?
I would think so. I know I would, for the fact that if he was just trying to get rid of evidence that he may not realize that there's cameras there. I don't know where the cameras were. I know that they've been mentioned several times.
And Anna, maybe someone saw a muddy guy rather than a bloody guy leaving the area if he slipped and slid down some hills.
I'm hoping, but that tip, and I don't know if that tip even exists, but if so, or if someone does see something like that and this jogs your memory, call that in. Good point.
And Molly, Shutter in Cemetery in the Dark. Shutter, you're absolutely correct. All right, and Kristen behind the crime door. 50 feet is what we have heard, but I think it was closer in my opinion.
Kristen, are you having a show tonight?
And that was early.
Oh, okay.
That was
I'm sorry.
before 9 o'clock.
Oh, okay.
So
I was wondering. She's good though. I mean, the way she handles everything.
And this'll do nicely. 2 months. Thank you. Thank you. Awesome. And DGR Dave, there are ways perps can kill people without getting lots of blood on themselves, even if using a sharp weapon.
Yes, and you know the experiments I did, even if he did have some on him, it was highly unlikely or if he wore layers. There's so many different ways. You're correct.
And Molly at Steve, from the map coordinates, it looks like LNA were left before it started getting really, really steep, or is it quite steep just getting to that approximate location?
If you came across the creek, it's not steep at all. But once you cross the creek and you go in just 100 feet or so, it becomes extremely steep towards the cemetery. And it's still relatively steep, even any area to get out of there is, you know, like I said, there's an incline and you can see the ridge line way above your head.
And Randy, from 1881, the first bridge was built out there.
Thank you, Randy.
That's an oldie. So after this 26, there's 100 more comments up there. All right. And Molly at Steve, you don't have to say what your theories are, but did being on site change your thoughts, feelings about different theories? Did you find it helpful in that way, not asking specifics?
Absolutely. Like I said, it changed my opinion on several different things.
We'll be back.
Yeah.
Anna Lizette, the private drive goes under the bridge?
Yes, it does.
Wow. Okay. And Anna, yes, deep fog reported on the night of the 13th, 2017, after the crime and into the morning.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't know about them.
All right. Randy, then the new bridge was built in 1891. So it's an... Ooh.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. And Copper Horse, great to see you. DC said it was all over with very quickly. My gut feeling leads me to believe he got them where he wanted, or it was a helter-skelter frenzy that ended very quickly.
I agree, Copper Horse. Absolutely agree.
Molly Lollipops, do you think they were where they were found the whole time or put there later? Having been on terrain, wondering what you think. Thank you.
I think they were there the whole time. The terrain is not easy to negotiate, even with someone that is walking and you have control over them. Carrying someone up and down those hills, no, that would be extremely difficult.
And Ann, if Perp was not planning on crossing the creek, where was he taking the girls after intercepting them at the southeast end of the bridge after down the hill direction?
That was one of the first things when I heard about this case and the abduction and down the hill. From my training and things is that you don't abduct people. If you're going to kill people, you know, a lot of murders happen at first contact. And then some, you know, people are found at different locations from the abductions, but always the abduction leads typically to a second site that they have pre-planned and are taking people to. And where was that? We don't know. Was there a vehicle? I'm going along those lines that there's a great possibility that there may have been a vehicle, or there was another location that wasn't across the creek. They may have been being taken to by vehicle or otherwise. We just don't know, but that's the easiest, most simple theory. And in law enforcement, a lot of times the easy, simple theories are exactly what happened.
And why? Seems challenging for a man of 77 to accomplish.
It is, but, you know, like I said, you know, in the video that Hoosier sent me, that, yeah, you can see that he was able to go up and down the hills, and he was winded. And then, you know, he's a farmer, and I mean, I don't know, but I don't think he had anything to do with it. That's just my personal opinion. From listening to and the training I've had in hundreds of interviews and thousands of interviews, and hundreds of hours of training and everything, listening to him describe and things and seeing mannerisms, I don't think he had a thing to do with it.
And Anna, basically, no one expected to find a crime. Short of drowning or falling off the bridge, there was no reason to think the girls couldn't respond to searchers calling their names.
Yes, and hindsight is what led to a lot of this stuff about where they should have been found, and we just don't know where the searchers went, but you're absolutely correct on that. There was no reason to believe there was a crime.
And Jennifer Rochelle, they ran across the creek to get away, in my opinion.
I'm going that route with you.
Mine too. And Anna, I think the girls and the killer bogged down crossing the creek, slipped and slid on the mud or stones, maybe even on ice.
Anything's possible. Could they have fallen in the creek? I know that the search team spent a lot of time in that creek for a reason.
Yeah. And Mark, seeing this in person instead of just helicopter footage or other videos of the crime scene area, what was your first impression? The rugged terrain or something else?
The rugged terrain was that if this continues as I approached where the crime scene was, I knew that once I got to that area, that it wasn't what I thought. For whatever reason, it never crossed my mind how steep some of those inclines were. Like I said, it's very deceiving from the helicopter footage. And now that you can go back and look at it with the maps and the topography, you can't see it with the green foliage. You can see it with the leaves off to a certain extent, but it still doesn't give it justice.
And Lisa Woody, what phase was the moon in?
I think that question was answered earlier. I think it was 3 days after full.
And sees through. I wish you could interview Eric Williams and get a clearer understanding of his search. His other interview was confusing.
That would be interesting to speak with him. I don't know if he's available to even speak.
And DGR Dave, the girls might have ran losing the BG, then got stuck in where they were killed, and he eventually caught up to them.
That's one of the things that I'm looking at, that you may be absolutely correct.
And JDR, in my opinion, this was planned, and he was probably acting out some long held fantasy as these predators do.
It's very possible.
And if searchers that night flashed light across the creek, they very well might not have seen victims, especially if covered with leaves or behind a tree trunk. Still, though, I think search should have continued.
And I'm sure there was some family members that,
Yeah.
did continue. I would. Mrs. Steve wouldn't ever, and I wouldn't, just for my nature, I wouldn't have quit. If it's a family or friend, I'd been there till the end.
He is not a quitter. Let's see here. Sees through, there was a searcher on Ron's property at 6:30 p.m. on the 13th, but I am guessing it was dark then.
Yes, I don't know what the here at 6:30 that time of year it's dark.
It's dark. And JDR, I just don't know why this has not been solved.
I'm beginning to
Sad.
question that too.
All right, Nana, how easy would it have been for the killer to gather limbs, leaves, etc., to at least partially cover the victims, as reported? How much time needed? How available are limbs?
Oh, easily accessible. I mean, you can go out there and make up a rake out of old tree limb top. I mean, it's extremely easy, or just grab them by the handfuls, armloads.
And Charlie, in your opinion, are there any theories we could rule out based on what you've seen with your own eyes?
That is a great question. I need to go and look at
She's a
some of
smart
those.
cookie.
Yeah, I got to go look at some of those theories, and there probably are quite a few. There's some of them out there that you could rule out just from whatever reason. But no, I need to look at that. That's a good question. Thank you.
DGR Dave, strange how the drone that was used didn't pick up any heat signatures.
Yeah, and I don't know what type of drone it was, and I think there's been some that he said he wasn't exactly in that area, and then you hear that yes, he was. Unfortunately, our drone, we weren't able to get it up due to the winds. Hopefully, we will at some point.
It was cold up there. All right, so I've done with those that I've starred, but you had 140 something comments. That's 932. Do you want to keep going or?
Seeing good, just scan through there and just a few questions, if there is.
Okay.
If we don't get all your questions, I'm gonna go back through this. Just mark where we're at, whatever time it is or whatever, and I'll go back through. There's other creators out there that's got shows and stuff, and we want them to. And I'm gonna go over and watch some of them, but we'll mark the time. I'll look at some of the questions, and we'll answer some of these questions. We'll be back Thursday night. So if we didn't get to your questions, just come over Thursday night and get them in early, and we'll get to them. I appreciate everybody. So came and watched the.
Y'all are amazing at all of these comments.
The presentation. We certainly appreciate everybody's how you can support us. We appreciate it. Give us a thumbs up, like, share, do whatever, subscribe, whatever you can do for us, and we appreciate it.
He's gonna be busy answering all y'all.
Yeah, it's and there's a lot of other stuff that we still got to cover. Got to do the search warrant stuff too. Now that I know a lot of things, looking at that search warrant is even more telling. And so we're going to be looking at some of that. And but y'all guys, everyone out there, stay safe. Appreciate y'all being here tonight. I'm going to go over and relax and watch Kristen for a little while. And
but then you gotta.
Then I've got to get on some of these.
Yes.
And I appreciate it, guys. Y'all have a great night.
Thanks so much. Love y'all.